How's it going, everyone? On today's episode of Dude, I Love My Ride, we have a very cool Land Cruiser, and Trey, its owner. How's it going, man?
Great, how are you doing?
Doing very well, especially because we're standing in front of this very cool LS Swap 60 Series. So tell me a little bit about this. How long have you had this vehicle?
Yeah, I got this in 2007. I was doing a lot of kayaking at the time, and during that time, the only car I really had to do the kayaking was a 2003 Maxima.
Okay.
So you can imagine getting up to like Deckers and places like that with
Not the most rugged Colorado
those roads.
rig, yeah.
It was beating it all to death. So I told my dad, I was like, I need something I can just take up the mountains and beat up.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I know this guy, and he was in Texas at the time. He said, I know this guy that's got a Land Cruiser. And like most people, I didn't know the difference with a Land Cruiser versus a Land Rover. I just didn't know.
Yeah.
This is my first four-wheel drive. And so I was like, sure, whatever it is, I'll take it. I see two different versions of what he's calling a 60 Series. He said like it's a 1980s something model. And I'm like, oh man, there's some with like the circle headlights, there's some with the square headlights. I really fell in love with the ones that were the circle headlights, the round headlights.
Because they do look classic.
They do. And I just got so excited. I was like, please tell me it's that one. And then when everyone else could get it, he brought it up. It was the one with the four headlights. And so that was right off the bat, me getting a little bit used to learning about the differences between the 60 Series, things like that. But that was my first getting into it. The previous owner didn't take the greatest care of it. It actually had different axle ratios in it.
Oh, really?
They had at one point blown the rear axle, and they thought that a 60 would work on an FJ62. That was a 370, 373 gear or something, and this is a 411 gear.
That sounds like a bad combo.
Right. So me getting right into one of my first four-wheel drives, I'm like, this doesn't seem like it's what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of crabbing, just even on dirt roads, you could feel it bind up against each other, and that took a couple of years to me just. So basically, I traded my four-wheeler for it, and it's been an evolution ever since then.
Well, and I can tell from just learning, initially what these vehicles are to where you're at now, there's obviously been a ton of time between that and where we sit today, because why don't you go ahead and pop the hood? We'll look at one of the coolest things that's going on with this, because, well, 60 Series Land Cruisers are incredible machines, and with the stock powertrains, they're awesome machines, but those stock powertrains here in Colorado, mile above sea level, going up steep grades, kind of leave you wanting for a little extra power, but now look at what we've got.
That's right, this helps a lot. When I was, like I said, getting up there into trying to do some kayaking, and I had the thing floored, and I was always worried, is it gonna overheat? I'd start smelling things, as it's just cooking.
Working hard.
It was working hard. And then the nail in the coffin was I was having a hard time getting the emissions figured out. And I took it down to a well-known shop in Denver, and they were telling me it was going to be a couple of grand. And I said, well, I bet I can do my own LS swap for that. And the rabbit hole started from there.
Well, and you did do. So this is a 5.3 LS, and you did the work actually putting this in the Land Cruiser here.
I did. There's, I'm part of a 4x4 group up here called Rising Sun. There was a few other guys that had done some swaps similar to this in a 60 Series, so I did get a little bit of help on how to go about it. But otherwise, yeah, it really wasn't that hard. These things don't have a ton of wires you have to hook up to them to get it going. So this was my daily driver at the time. I wish I would have had more time to do it, actually spend my time and do it the way that I would like to.
Yeah, but, and then behind this motor too, you've also got a GM transmission, right?
It's the 4L60, which that blew probably like 5 years ago, and then I swapped it out to I built it out to a 4L65, the extra planetary gear.
And do you remember where you got the adapter to go from the GM transmission to the transfer case? Because is it a stock transfer case in this?
It is a stock transfer case. It's a well-known one. They do them for everybody.
Was it easy to find?
It was easy to find.
Nice.
Yep.
Yeah.
They do this for Broncos and for basically everybody. I'm blanking on the name of them, but yep.
Yeah. Well, and it's nice too that this is a familiar enough.
Advanced adapters.
Okay, advanced adapters. And this is a familiar enough platform that it's not too surprising that you can find quite a few parts to make swaps like this more doable. So roundabout, how long do you think it took from pulling the old powertrain out to your first time driving this on the road and starting to do some refining?
Yeah, I would imagine, like I said, this is my daily driver, so I certainly cut some corners trying to get it in there. I want to say it was about 4 months of just on my off time trying to get it in there. They've got kits now that are a lot easier. I'm waiting for this engine to die so I could throw in an LS3 in it or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I've already started collecting all those things. But now, I mean, back in the day, there's this, you're conflicted about where exactly do I put the engine? How do I align it to all the drive shafts and everything? You have to do a lot of calculating. Now, they've got it to where, people already give you the engine mounts. You just put them into this exact spot. You put it right into where the tranny, that cross member goes.
Yeah.
And they've got it all dialed in for you. It's just a buy and put it in there, almost plug and play.
And did the transfer case end up moving forward or backward at all?
It moved, I believe it moved forward.
Okay.
So the angles in the front actually are not at a great angle. I wouldn't want to be driving it probably going 70 miles an hour.
Yeah.
I need to work a little bit with my caster to get that angle better. But otherwise, yeah, the angles are all great in the back end, and it'll do no problem doing 90 if you want to.
So up front, I see you've got a steel bumper and a winch set up. Is this also, I'm assuming, a pretty easy part to find for a Land Cruiser?
Yeah, there's a lot of places that sell the bumpers. This one came from a company called Trail Tailor. That they do some pretty good work on bumpers. It is getting a little bit harder on the 60 series to find people that make bumpers.
Really?
For instance, the sliders out here came from a guy that was local here called Bump It Off Road, and he's not quite doing some of the work anymore either. So the thing is, they didn't make that many of these Land Cruisers, right?
Yeah.
Would you like to take a guess on how many you think they made per year?
Oh, per year? Oh,
Yeah.
no, 10,000? 15?
Maybe four. Maybe
Really?
four. That's pretty much the entire time they were doing it. So it's not like you're going out and finding parts like you could on a Mustang or something where they sold a few 100,000 of them. But sure, there's still plenty of aftermarket support.
And then I can see for suspension, obviously not stock. So you've got an interesting set of shocks. Is a brand that I haven't seen before. Tell me about these.
Yep. Whenever we did, so this whole suspension setup is built out as an 80 suspension. And the shop that was doing this really mentioned that going with the Tough Dog shocks, which I hadn't heard about them either. I was a little bit wary of going with a brand I hadn't heard of. Normally you'd go with like an Old Man Emu or something.
Yeah.
But he had really sold me on them. They are an Australian, from my understanding, a shock, and they're adjustable. So it does make a big difference taking this thing from getting it all the way to the stiffest part down to whenever ready to go rock crawling, really letting it loosen up and have a lot more travel.
Yeah, and then on your wheel tire setup too, you've got one of Colorado's favorite tires, which is the KO2. Good in the snow, good in the dirt, good on rocks. How have these treated you?
Those have been great. So whenever it came to figuring out the wheel, I had a different wheel on there when I first did this swap. The 80 series axles are quite a bit wider than the 60 series. So you can tell I'm already sticking out a ways from the body, which I need to get wheels that are more offset. But these actually come from, my other truck is an 80 series, so I just swapped wheels. These actually came from those are 80 series wheels.
Well, and they look good on this rig.
I was surprised. I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out, but I think they turned out pretty well. I just wish I need to get something to tuck them in a little bit more.
And have you messed with, speaking of the axles, have you messed with anything as far as gearing, lockers, limited slip, anything?
No, I had lockers in it, but once I swapped it out to the 80 series, I lost that. So I will end up putting another air locker in it. But no, gearing is all stock. The 80 series axles were the same as what was in it for the FJ62. They're 411s. So no, it's stock.
And I would assume with the 5.3, plenty of torque to turn a slightly bigger tire.
That's right.
Not a problem.
Yeah, that hasn't been a problem. I mean, it's not going to be, some of the modern cars now doing 400, 500 horsepower. It's not like that, but it's plenty fine for modern cruising around. Going up Eisenhower Tunnel, it'll do it at 80 miles an hour, no problem.
At the end of the day, these four-wheel drives were never meant to be fast. You're never realistically going to make them fast, but having enough power and enough torque to power up those steep grades is really all that I would want, at least in a build like this. And then underneath, anything else that you guys did? I see you've got a little bit of is that a stock skid or?
No, that's not a stock skid.
Thicker,
that was, again, Bump It Off Road, who helped me with these sliders back when he was doing this kind of work. He did that. He did the cross member for the T-case there, and he also did the skid plate.
Nice. Yeah, it's a pretty solid looking piece of steel. I guess that kind of gives it away that it's not a stock piece.
Right, and I've used it a good amount. But you can see, the different arms. I previously had adjustable lower arms there in the back, and it was causing more torque steer than I liked, so swapped them out to the stock 80 arms.
Nice. And were those pretty easy to bolt up to this frame?
Yes, they were. Yep.
Nice.
Yep. At this point, all the regular 80 components, all the arms and everything will bolt straight up to what this is.
Which is pretty cool.
Now the wheelbase is shorter than the 80
Right.
was. So you can't just obviously put a 60 on top of an 80. You have to shorten the wheelbase. You talk about the magic wheelbase, right? What is that, the 112.2?
Yeah,
Something
yeah.
like that. That started with a generation right after this. So
Right.
I think this is like 108 or something like that.
Yeah, slightly shorter, which is also not a bad thing because a little help with breakover.
Right.
And then you've also got a pretty substantial roof rack here. This is a cool system.
I do. That's from a company called Gamaviti. Again, a member out here in our Colorado 4x4 group. He makes some really great ways to adapt things to that. You can even see on the other side how he's got some quick release pins for putting awnings on and things like that. But
Yeah.
I'd suggest anybody go check out Gamaviti, and you can see some of those products. It's really, really beefy.
Yeah, and I like that you've got these handles here so that you can grab onto it and get up to the top, which makes it pretty easy. So that's a cool system and good looking too.
It does. Trying to get into a rooftop tent or whatever, those things help out a lot.
Yeah. Do you ever mount any rooftop tents?
I do.
Up there?
I do. I've got a Terrapod rooftop tent that's as slim as you can get. The issue is the garage door still isn't quite tall enough for me to fit in with it in there. So it's a challenge constantly putting it on and off.
Yeah. So you try not to run it year round, I guess.
Right.
And then around back, stock rear bumper, but there is something interesting going on with your rear glass here.
Yeah, and I can open this one. So people have mentioned when they're looking at this, I feel like it's Spectre Off-Road or a company like that makes a sliding window. That's not what this is. This was, my understanding from the previous owner, pulled from an RV of some sort. I've tried to find the exact model, but I can't. But as you can see, this one does have the screen in it, which I don't believe the Spectre does, which is amazing when I'm camping in there. Now, in these trucks, all the seats fold exactly flat.
Yeah.
So you don't really even have to have a platform if you don't want to, and then you've got those screens, and you can keep out of the way of the mosquitoes and whatnot.
Well, and that way, if you want to go without having a rooftop tent up there, you can also camp out inside of it, and being able to open that up is really nice. That's pretty cool, and it fits really well in there. I mean, it looks like it's made for it.
It does. I was really surprised when I found out that wasn't a stock item.
Yeah, no, apparently. And then otherwise, on the rest of the vehicle, have you had to do much as far as paint and body work, or you kind of leave it as is?
So this did have a pretty affordable respray on it at one point. After I did the 80 series suspension, I just wanted to make sure that the investment I had made in the frame was going to stay fresh.
Yeah.
So I took it up to the rust doctor in Grand Junction to have him go over the frame and go over any little rust areas that were happening around the body. There was like one in the door.
Well, it's really cool walking around this and looking at all the things that you've done to this vehicle. What's even cooler is getting it on the road.
Absolutely.
And seeing how it drives.
Sounds great.
So is this the stock shifter?
That's the stock shifter. It's got a little bit of a play in it because it doesn't quite exactly match up to the original one. But yeah, I can get all the way, I mean, it's the same, basically the main 4 gears I'm looking for. So I can get all the way down from first up to overdrive.
Which is cool because that kind of maintains some of the look and feel of this whole interior.
That's right. Yeah, if you're looking at this whole interior, the main, because I really wanted my instrumentation to look stock.
This whole powertrain, since you've swapped it and been daily driving it for how long now?
Since about 2007.
Okay, wow.
The one interesting fact I kind of didn't get to earlier is this was actually stolen from me.
The truck was?
The truck was.
Oh,
I used to work around Coors Field. And in 2018 or 19 or so, I came out and it wasn't in the parking lot anymore.
Listening to this now, the way that it sounds going down the road, a V8 sounds very healthy, very happy. It's a good rumble, and this also rides really well. We're about to drive over these train tracks, and it's sitting on these coils now. That's pretty good for a solid axle vehicle ride. That's really not bad.
So I've spent a whole lot of time. The biggest thing for me was the brakes weren't working that well.
Yeah.
So I've affectionately called this the goat when I first got it. And it's since on taken on the name of Franken Goat because it's just a mishmash of all kinds of different cars. So
yeah.
The brakes are pretty much all 4th gen 4Runner.
Really?
And they stop really well.
Setting up the 4Runner brakes on the 80 series axles, is that pretty straightforward? They kind of bolt right up, or do you have to get a custom kit, or how does it work?
It was basically it's called a big brake caliper, and it bolts right up to it.
Nice. And then for maintaining this powertrain, because obviously now this engine and transmission are living in a vehicle that they weren't originally engineered to be in. Maintaining this setup over the course of the last 14 years, has that been pretty doable, or any headaches with it?
So the only headaches I've had is whenever there's been something I just couldn't figure out, like out of vibration, I give it to somebody else and they're just like, I don't even know what to do with this thing.
Can't even touch it.
So for the most part, I really don't let anybody else touch it. I try to do all the work I can myself. But no, having said that, I've got this, I've got the 80, I've had a 40, so I've got any mix of all the Land Cruisers up to a 200 now as well. This is the one that I actually really crave working on. I know every bolt, and I should. I'm the one that put them all there. But yeah, I'm very familiar with this one. I did work on the 80. I rebuilt the engine in that one, and that was fun to see the engineering that goes into how Toyota builds the 1FC. But this one, I'm always digging in here, being like, oh, I hear some little squeak somewhere. I want to go tighten that down. And, you know, I can't. This is my baby. This is one that I'm just always tinkering around the speed here.
It trips the tires a little.
Yeah. So it's not, compared to modern, it's, you know, nothing insane, but I don't really need a whole lot more power. Now it would be nice to have the LS3 with, you know, 400 horsepower or whatever.
Yeah. So after all the years that you've lived with this LS swap and all the work that you put into doing it in the first place, if you had to go back and do it again, would you still do an LS?
I would definitely do an LS. It's a good question, because living with the 80 series now, the 80 series, I've contemplated the same thing, do an LS motor in that one. And the 80 series has just enough power, I feel like, to be able to get around town.
This is a big enough vehicle that amount of power up here at altitude, if you're at sea level, if you lived in a flat place, it'd be fine. And I'm sure there are plenty solid motors, so I'm sure they've got their die-hard cult following, but when it comes to living here at altitude with the steep kind of grades that we get up in the mountains, having that extra power really makes a world of difference.
Absolutely. Yeah. Especially, I mean, if you're going up, you know, trying to get up to Eisenhower Tunnel and you're trying to get around big, I mean, you know, the big rigs are on the right lane. Well, back in those days, I was just stuck right behind them. But it's just not safe, to be honest, to be going around Eisenhower Tunnel with everybody passing you.
Yeah.
You're barely keeping 20 to 30 miles an hour at best.
Well, and if you're hauling gear too, you know, you've got your camping stuff with you, maybe you've got a rooftop tent on, you've got steel bumpers, so it's not like it's even just a stock vehicle, it's laden with all your adventure gear and all of the different four-wheel drive modifications, stuff to make it more rugged. So yeah, you're looking at a vehicle that was never setting any records as far as speed in the first place. And then you make it even heavier and you put it a mile above sea level. Having something like this under the hood definitely make a big difference.
And not only that, but you're getting better miles per gallon doing it, right?
Yeah,
I was only getting, you know, I mean, me going up Eisenhower Tunnel with a 3FE, I was getting maybe 10 miles per gallon, whereas now I'm pretty well doing, you know, around 15.
So it sounds better, no worse on fuel economy, better power. And sure, you know, it's not the cheapest thing in the world to do it, but
you know, it wasn't bad. And I would just add on top of that, it's a little easier to maintain, to be honest. You should, if you've ever seen a 3FE on all the emissions hoses that's going everywhere, it's kind of a nightmare to figure out what's going where. But this wasn't bad for me to do. I did this, you know, again, over a few months, a long time ago, but I got this from the junkyard. So the engine, the transmission, the computer, the throttle pedal, the computer for the throttle pedal, all of that was $2,000.
Yeah, that's not bad at all.
So that's not bad. I think you spend, you know, I probably got somewhere around $8,000 total in it because it all adds up, right?
This vehicle drives really well. I think the work that you've done to it makes it a much more usable thing, which is cool because we love these old school machines, but if you want to use something like this as a daily driver, there's a lot of things that start to wear on you after a little while, and everything that you've done to this seems to address that.
Absolutely. Plenty of creature comforts. I mean, obviously the stereo, having some navigation going. The one thing that me and my wife always battle about is she wishes it had power windows. Yeah. And again, that's one of the rare things about this FJ62 is it's all crank windows and crank, and the door locks are manual as well, which I like. I prefer not having. When it's going to break, I know I can just roll it down, you know, whatever.
And if that's the one thing that she has to deal with, that's not too bad.
Exactly.
But thank you so much for bringing it by. It's really
Absolutely.
cool to get to see this,
Thanks
talk to you about everything that you've done to it. And that's all for this video. Feel free to drop a comment down below. Let us know what you think.